kids and families, welcome to virtual VBS week 4. We're so excited to have you with us. My name is Erin Cooley and I'm a member here at Immanuel. I also help with kids ministry and evangelism. We're so glad to have you here with us today, and we're excited to share this super simple craft with you. For those of you who are big kids, you can have your family help you, but you might be able to do this all by yourself. Since this week we learned all about the miracle of Jesus with the loaves and fishes, we are going to make a really simple bread recipe that you can make yourself. And every time you make it, you can think about all the ways that Jesus provides for all of your needs. All you're going to need is some all-purpose flour, some salt, and some active dry yeast. I'm going to start by washing my hands to make sure that we're all food safe. All right, good to go. First thing we're going to do is open up our flour, and you're going to need 3 cups. I have a half cup measuring cup here, so I'm going to add 6 of these. 2, 3, 5. That means that we have a grand total of 3 cups of all-purpose flour in our bowl. The next thing we're going to add is some active dry yeast. Now I have mine in one of these little packages like this. You can buy these at the grocery store. Sometimes they also come in a jar. You can use that as well. Now I don't need this entire package of active dry yeast. I only need a half teaspoon. So I'm going to use my half teaspoon and measure that out and add that into my flour. Now the super cool thing about yeast is that it's actually alive. Now it's alive in kind of a different way than I'm alive or you're alive, but it is still alive. So we have to wake it up. And the way that we wake it up is we have to add some water. So we're going to add in 1.5 cups of lukewarm water. So you want it to feel kind of warm but not super hot, because if you have it too hot, then it will kill your yeast and it won't help your bread raise. So you gotta be kind of careful about that. The last thing that we need to add to our dough for our bread is some salt. Salt makes everything taste better, and depending upon the kind of salt you have, you may have to adjust how much you're using. I'm just using regular iodized table salt, so I'm going to use 1 teaspoon, but if you're using something like kosher salt or sea salt, you might need to add just a little bit more because those are bigger grains, and so therefore you might need just a little bit more. Now here's the fun part. I'm going to grab my wooden spoon and I'm going to stir this together. Now this bread recipe is a little bit different than some bread recipes that require you to knead it and work it really hard. This one is so easy. And in fact, the less you work it, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to use my spoon. I'm going to stir it just enough to get all of the flour incorporated, and I'll show you what that looks like. Give it a couple good swirls. It's starting to come together. Kind of scraping down the sides a little bit. All right, it's come together, and that's all I need to do. See, you can kind of see what it looks like sticking on my spoon there. I'm just gonna scrape that off. And I'm gonna let you come in and take a look at it. Now, it doesn't look like a whole lot right now, but you can see that it's kind of all together in one ball, and it's all mixed together, but it's not, you know, like a smooth dough like what you think a pizza dough might look like. The best part about that is that means that all of those little pockets of air that are in there right now are going to turn into yummy pockets of air in our bread too, and it's going to be super delicious. So then you're going to grab yourself some plastic wrap, just enough to be able to cover your bowl. You're going to lay it over the top and wrap it around nice and tight, because you want that warm water to do the work of waking up that yeast. As I mentioned, yeast is alive, and so as it wakes up, it is going to produce something called carbon dioxide, which is the same stuff that you produce when you breathe. So the yeast needs to breathe, and we need to give it some time to do that, because that's what's gonna make our bread raise. All right, we've got her all covered. Now we're just gonna set that somewhere in the kitchen, somewhere where we can kind of keep an eye on it, but we don't have to watch it real closely. And you have to leave it for at least 8 hours, but you can leave it even longer than that, all the way up to 24. It just depends on what works best for you. 8 hours later, our bread dough looks really, really different. Take a look at it now. Remember what it looked like before? And now look at it. It's risen a whole lot. We'll take the plastic wrap off, and we're gonna save that because we're gonna need it here in just a minute. But look at it. You can see all those bubbles in there. Remember we talked about the yeast and the carbon dioxide breathing? That's exactly what's happened. And that's exactly how we want it to look. So we are going to take a little bit of flour to help flour our surface, because this is a really, really, really wet bread dough. It's a little different maybe than certain other types of bread. As I mentioned, we're not gonna knead this dough. We are just going to kind of not mess with it as much as possible. So we've got it there. I'm gonna use our wooden spoon to kind of help us get it out of our bowl and onto our floured surface. Just like that. And we just kind of need to get it in sort of a loafish shape. So I'm gonna take a little bit of extra flour, sprinkle it there on the top. And I'm gonna be cooking mine in something round. So I'm just going to form this into a round-ish loaf. Now it'll sort of take on the shape of whatever it is you're baking it in, so you don't have to be super picky about it. And then you just take your plastic wrap that you saved and lay it over the top, because you're going to have to preheat your oven. Let me wash my hands, get some of the dough off of here. Don't want to get that on my oven. Perfect. So then we're gonna preheat our oven to 450 degrees. That's pretty hot, so depending upon whether or not you were allowed to use the oven by yourself, you might need some help from a grown-up. So next you need to decide what it is that you want to bake your bread in. I like to use my Dutch oven, but you can use anything that is oven safe and has some sort of a covering. You could use a pizza stone, you could use a cookie sheet and then cover it in aluminum foil. You can use like a cast iron skillet. Any of that works just fine. So all I have to do is take off the lid. I'm gonna put my Dutch oven into the oven for 30 minutes while the oven is preheating. That's gonna make that bottom part of the Dutch oven really nice and hot, so that when I put the bread dough in, it gives me that nice crispy crust. After our Dutch oven has been in the oven for 30 minutes and it's gotten all nice and warm, all we have to do now is get ready to take it out. Since it's 450 degrees, that means it's gonna be really hot, so I'm gonna use my hot pads. And we bring it out here onto the counter. I'm going to use a little bit of parchment paper to help prevent any sticking. Then we take off our plastic wrap from our dough. We put our dough onto the parchment paper, and we put that into our cooking vessel. We add our lid. We're gonna put it back in the oven. After it's been in the oven for 30 minutes covered, we need to remove the cover so that it can get even more golden brown and delicious. All right, our bread has been in the oven for its additional amount of time uncovered. Let's take it out and see what it looks like. Oh, wow. I want to be a little bit careful because it is still really hot. Take a look what we made. There we go. Comes out really nice and easily on that parchment. And there's your loaf of bread. So super simple, super easy. You can make it at home, and every time you do, you can think about all of the ways that Jesus provides for your needs. Thanks for being with us here this week on VBS. We'll see you next time. Bye.